When India's Directorate General of Trade Remedies, DGTR, launched a new anti-dumping investigation into solar cell imports from China earlier this year. The announcement sent shockwaves through both the energy and manufacturing sectors. For many, it was a sign of New Delhi's growing resolve to defend domestic industries against unfair trade practices. For others, it was a red flag, a move that could make solar energy, a crucial part of India's green transition, more expensive for consumers. The debate over anti-dumping measures has never been more intense. Are they the right weapon to protect India's manufacturers, or a blunt instrument that punishes Indian consumers in the long run? To understand the dilemma, it's important to grasp what anti-dumping actually means. Dumping occurs when a company from one country sells goods in another market at a price lower than the cost of production, or below what it charges at home. The aim is often to flood the market, drive local producers out of business, and then dominate it with higher prices later. To prevent this, governments impose anti-dumping duties, essentially tariffs that correct the price gap and restore fairness. India, like many other countries, has relied heavily on these measures to shield its domestic sectors from foreign competition. Yet every duty that protects a producer risks raising the cost of living for a consumer. In many ways, anti-dumping duties have become both India's sword and shield in global trade. Over the past 3 decades, India has emerged as the largest user of anti-dumping measures in the world, accounting for nearly 17.4% of all cases globally since 1995. By the end of 2023, it had initiated more than 1,175 anti-dumping investigations, and the momentum only accelerated in 2024 with a 66% surge, 50 new cases compared to 30 the previous year. Critics say this reflects overreach. Defenders argue it's economic realism in a world still dominated by subsidized exports from manufacturing giants like China. Supporters of India's proactive stance point out that anti-dumping measures are not about isolationism, but about survival. India has been labeled as the largest user of anti-dumping law and criticized for misusing it, says Biswajit Dar, member of the Government of India's Board of Trade. But look at the economic environment in India. Anti-dumping measures serve as a weapon for developing nations like ours to protect domestic markets from unwanted competition. His argument carries weight, especially when you consider the scale of foreign undercutting in key sectors. Take solar energy. In 2024, the DGTR found that solar cell imports from China were being sold in India at prices far below their normal value, undercutting local manufacturers and threatening an industry critical to India's clean energy ambitions. Imports surged by more than 240% during the investigation period, with Chinese products capturing a staggering 77% of the Indian market. The government's response, recommending anti-dumping duties of up to 30% for 3 years, was not just about protecting jobs, but about preserving India's ability to sustain its domestic renewable capacity. Without such measures, policymakers argue, India's 38.1 gigawatt solar capacity target by 2025 could have been jeopardized, and energy security compromised. Similar logic drives anti-dumping cases in the steel sector, where global oversupply, particularly from China, Indonesia, and Vietnam, has caused imports worth over $700 million to flood India. Domestic mills in Odisha, Jharkhand, and Maharashtra, already reeling from global price volatility, face the constant threat of being undercut by low-cost imports. For them, anti-dumping duties are a lifeline that keeps furnaces running and workers employed. The underlying economic rationale is clear. Temporary tariffs can prevent foreign firms from capturing the market through predatory pricing, ensuring long-term competition and stability. But for every producer who benefits, there is a consumer, or an MSME, that bears the cost. Anti-dumping duties raise prices not only for the targeted imported goods, but also for downstream products that depend on them. For instance, when India imposed duties on imported jute to protect local growers, jute prices rose by around 15%, directly inflating the cost of packaging and other jute-based goods. In essence, consumers and small manufacturers ended up footing the bill for a protectionist policy designed to help farmers. This dynamic is especially harsh on MSMEs, which form the backbone of India's manufacturing ecosystem. When duties are imposed on raw materials or intermediate goods, say on chemicals like soda ash used in glass and soaps, or copolymer polyol used in foam furniture, the costs cascade down the supply chain. One industry executive put it bluntly: anti-dumping duties on raw materials can have an adverse impact on MSMEs. These smaller firms lack the financial cushion to absorb rising input costs, and often struggle to compete against imported finished goods, even as they pay more for domestically sourced raw materials. Another unintended consequence is what trade economists call diversion and circumvention. When India blocks imports from one dumping country, exporters often reroute goods through another, slightly altering manufacturing or labeling to bypass the restrictions. A striking example came from the vitamin supplement market. When duties were imposed on vitamin C imports from one country, imports from others surged almost overnight. This forces domestic industries to file successive petitions, creating a never-ending cycle of legal and bureaucratic battles rather than fostering genuine competitiveness. The deeper problem lies in how India decides which anti-dumping measures to impose. Unlike some developed economies, India's current legal framework does not mandate a formal public interest test, a structured review that weighs the benefit to domestic producers against the cost to consumers and downstream industries. As a result, many duties are imposed purely on the basis of injury to a single domestic industry, without considering the ripple effects across the wider economy. Economists have long argued that this omission weakens India's trade policy credibility and risks alienating the very sectors, like MSMEs and consumers, that the government seeks to empower. As one analyst put it, India needs to choose anti-dumping cases wisely, industry by industry, not indiscriminately. This brings us to the crux of the debate. Anti-dumping duties are both a shield and a sword, balancing producer welfare against consumer welfare. On one hand, they are essential to protect nascent or strategically vital sectors, like solar, steel, or electronics, from being gutted by foreign dumping. On the other, their careless use can stifle competition, inflate prices, and erode the purchasing power of ordinary Indians. So, are anti-dumping measures a smart move? The answer lies somewhere in the middle. When applied selectively, to counteract genuine cases of predatory pricing in strategic industries, vital to national security or long-term economic growth, they are not only smart, but essential. However, when used as a blanket protectionist tool, they risk turning into a hidden tax that punishes consumers and weakens downstream innovation. For India's trade policymakers, the challenge ahead is to evolve from a defensive, case-by-case strategy to a holistic one. That means institutionalizing a transparent public interest clause, improving monitoring of circumvention routes, and ensuring that duties are reviewed regularly to prevent overreach. In a country where both producers and consumers are crucial to economic growth, anti-dumping laws must be wielded like a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Because in the end, the goal is not just to shield Indian factories, it is to strengthen the Indian marketplace. Protection should be smart, not suffocating. Only then can India ensure that the law designed to defend its industries doesn't quietly end up hurting its people.